Liz, and welcome to the Liz Javier podcast. I am so grateful for you being here. If you stuck around for the last 3 episodes, amazing. Welcome back to episode number 4. If you are first timer, thank you for coming. You could be listening to anything, but you decided to come here and give me a shot. So let me have an opportunity to really give you some inspiration. And if you were able to watch my last 3 podcasts, I hope that you were able to be inspired and really take away some from that story. Now, if you listen to my last 3 podcasts, I had the opportunity to share my story, especially on episode number 3. I really was able to give myself the permission to be a little bit more vulnerable to my audience, and that was scary. I wasn't sure putting myself out there, the judgments that would come. You hear about people on the internet and social media attacking some of the influencers and content creators, and I had a little fear that that might be the situation. But everybody that did reach out was very supportive, very encouraging, and so those that did, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and don't be afraid to comment in the posts. I would love to hear from you and what you think. If it's giving you inspiration, if it's not, I really take feedback well. If there was any negative responses to anything in my episodes, I didn't hear it. So now, being vulnerable is kind of one of the hardest things that you could potentially run into and do. For me, being vulnerable becomes very scary, and a lot of judgments from other people are scary, but there's a whole other caveat to being vulnerable. And, it got me thinking a little bit, well, maybe I should talk about vulnerability. What is the impact of it and how it's actually helped me find personal fulfillment in my own life? We could walk around, look at social media, and we see all the good things in life. I can even attest to that. You look on my social media, you saw the inspirational posts. If you're a follower on my personal social media, which I try to keep a little more separate, I post all the good things when I go hiking, when I go on trips, when I'm feeling good. There's not really many times that I feel bad or sad necessarily. Those really come and go and don't affect me too much. But there are times where I want to be vulnerable, and this podcast is giving me that opportunity to share some of those moments. And so just know that if you are afraid of being vulnerable, if you're afraid of judgments of other people, you're not alone. And I'm kind of one of those people that don't really give an F about what other people think about me. So much that someone was like, oh my gosh, you need to read this book. It's The Art of Not Giving an F. You know the word. I'm like, you know what? I don't give a F so much that I don't really want to read that book. I don't really care what other people think about me. And that is somewhat true. I really do care what my listeners and my followers think about me because I do want to be inspirational. But at the same time, who has time to be really worrying about judgments? And so many people in this world do. So let's explore it a little bit. I want to go into a deep exploration of vulnerability today. I want to share the way that we hide our vulnerability, why we might do it, how we shelter our vulnerability, and then I want to share some ways that you can start being more vulnerable in your life and how it can help you get more out of life as well. Now, disclaimer, after this podcast, if you feel so called to be vulnerable, do not go out there and just start sharing with the world everything and all your thoughts. Don't be vulnerable out there into the world necessarily. If it falls into the wrong hands, you could get the negative part of it, which means people will judge you. They will give you negativity, and you're going to go ahead and put those walls back up again. So breaking down those walls, I'll tell you, I've had a wall the size of the Great Wall of China up previously, and little by little, brick by brick, I've been breaking that down. There's been people in my life that have also added to and just slapped on the concrete and slapped on another brick. They've really added to me being shut off to the world. And when you hide your vulnerability, when you build up those walls from yourself and your emotions to other people, you're missing out on opportunities for connection. I want to talk about connection a lot because if you think about it, what do we all desire in this world? Recognition, love, someone recognizing us. It's all connection. That's all it really is. So let's go out there and be vulnerable to the people that are going to respect that. Let's dip our toes into it. If it's something that scares you, small things at a time, right? Start small and then you can start to go a little bit bigger. So let's start. When did we first start to be vulnerable? What does vulnerability really mean? If we look at the definition of vulnerability, it is the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. So when we're putting ourselves out there, we are being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. That's pretty scary. I don't know about you. Sometimes emotionally seems a little bit more scary being attacked than physically. Obviously, you don't want to be hurt physically, but emotionally, that scars you just as much as if you were to be physically attacked. So, when were we the most vulnerable? Probably as a child. We were most vulnerable when we were growing up. We were crying when we wanted to cry. We asked for things that we want to ask. We allowed ourselves to be more vulnerable. And over time, as we're told no, or there's times that, people had hurt us emotionally. Sometimes it happens very early in life. And for some people that are really lucky, that doesn't happen until their teenage years or their 20s or their 30s as they start to get into relationships. I know a big, huge part of mine was, relationships that I had, romantic relationships. Those were the times that like I felt I could be the most vulnerable at first. And once that trust was broken and I was hurt emotionally, it was so much harder to be vulnerable to people around me that I cared about, but then also relationships after that. Now, let's talk about some fears around being vulnerable. A lot of that makes us really anxious about being emotionally open with others. You might feel some fear of being judged, of being rejected, or even people taking advantage of you. And if you are a person that, fears being vulnerable, you might be closing yourself off to others, meaning that you talk to people, it seems more transactional than it is an actual connective relationship. So you might talk to somebody and say, how's your day? How are things going? You share some things, but like the actual emotions behind it, you close yourself up from sharing those because you are not sure how they're going to react. Another way you can feel vulnerability is just being perfect, right? Perfectionism is a big sign that you fear vulnerability. Because if you think about it, if you're doing something or a project, and you're like, I can't put this out, I can't show anybody because it's not perfect, it's not ready. You fear people judging you. You fear that being something that if it's not perfect, it's not meant for other people. Some people blame themselves for being open. So if you are open to somebody and you say, share a feeling or emotion, you might apologize right away and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be doing that. You come to this like agreement with yourself that you're doing something wrong. Another way that you fear vulnerability, maybe you can really not understand or you doubt that you can read the room. Like you're not sure if this is a good place to share your feelings, even though you're like, oh yeah, it's a perfect place to do it, but you have that doubt within you. And I mean, ultimately, you just worry about what people think. When you wrap it all up and we tie a bow on it, what it really means is you worry about what other people think. And where does that worry come from? That's the first step of understanding how to be more vulnerable. Because acknowledging those fears and what scares you about being vulnerable can help you overcome them. I mean, that's pretty much with everything that you need to do. You have to find clarity. Clarity and being clear about what it is helps you focus on how to change it. So think about what you're trying to do. For me, my fear was vulnerability to do this podcast. What did I fear? I felt fear of people judging me, of negative comments, of internet trolls coming in and trying to steal my thunder, all of those things. But let me share with you another example. When I first became a coach at Orange Theory, I wasn't very vulnerable. I was really a surface level type of coach where I let you know kind of a little bit minimally about me, my favorite color, my favorite food, what I'm doing for the weekend, what I did last weekend. It was very transactional. And I'll tell you the story about when I became vulnerable and all of that and what the reactions were. But what I feared in being vulnerable was that these people were going to judge me. They weren't going to come to my class anymore. I was going to be told, like, oh, you're wrong. Like, get over it. You're being too sensitive. Why are you sharing your feelings with us? You're just our coach. So all those were all the fears that I came up, having a little bit of anxiety because public speaking one was just really hard in itself. But then also like telling people my story and breaking down the wall. I mean, that was a whole other level of being able to speak in front of people, whether it was individually or in front of a whole entire class. So I acknowledged that, okay, I have a fear of this. Where did it come from? And so when I thought about it, I kind of just went backwards. And I didn't realize it at the time. I kind of just forced myself to be vulnerable. But now that I'm thinking about it, and I go back to thinking, okay, when was a time that I was vulnerable and I was judged? And the big one comes to the relationship, my first relationship ever. I was vulnerable in that situation, always shared my fears and emotion, and it was always shut down. Like, you're crazy. That's not what's going on. Just what they call gaslighting now. I didn't know what it was back then, but they call it gaslighting now. And so I just took that and is like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm being vulnerable. That's a bad thing. That's why I'm getting this reaction. If I go back even further, as a child, just being vulnerable, I can't remember specific situations, but I do remember just not being heard. And it was because I would say something and then it might be emotional. And if I was ever emotional, cried, I was like, stop crying. There's no reason to cry. Crying is being vulnerable. It's expressing an emotion, even though you can't say what you necessarily mean as a child. You can cry. And when you're told not to be emotional, stop crying, get over it, you're not allowed to be vulnerable and express those emotions and feelings healthy. So, not necessarily back to childhood, it could be, but just start and go backwards. What were the last things or last times or last situations where you're vulnerable and what happened? And did you put a little bit, another layer of that wall up? And how high is that wall? Now, next step in this situation was, okay, I'm going to start small. I'm going to find small ways to be vulnerable. And it might just be trying to find ways in situations with some of the people that I was talking to one on one. So, how do I share myself with somebody and get just a little personal without sharing the really deep, deep emotions that I want to share? And during that time, it all started with maybe how I felt about something specific. Um, say, for instance, a passion of mine, how passionate I was about when I started my wellness and coaching business back then. I'm working on being more vulnerable and sharing that with not just people on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, but also with people in my personal life. You know, it's sometimes easier to share something out into social media than it is to share with one-on-one with somebody really close to you. So for me, back when I was a coach, it was starting small, like sharing those dreams and aspirations that I had, something that I was trying to work towards. And, seeing the reactions of people really like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I'm here to support you. Like, keep me updated, was like, wow, those weren't the reactions that I was expecting. I was expecting judgment. Why do you want to do that? Like, what is the point of that? Like, you're not going to be good at that. Those are the things that I thought I was going to hear because of how my brain was trained previously. That's how I heard things when people would talk. But being able to be around the right people and share that vulnerability was great. So when I started sharing the small things, that opened the door to bigger things. And when I was first a coach, people didn't like me. people thought I was too cocky when I was scared as hell. Like, I was scared to be on a mic in front of people. I really wanted to do well. I knew I wasn't perfect, and I was fighting that perfectionism. Like, I should just give up because I'm not good at it. And nobody understood that. They just saw me as like this trainer that was just like, oh, she's good, better than everybody else. Like, she bosses us around inside this gym. And that wasn't it at all. I was faking it until you making it, right? So I was trying to put on a front that I was super confident. And that really came off as cocky and condescending at times. And so my head coach at the time, my boss, had told me you need to be more vulnerable. You need to have your personality come out a little bit more in a different way. So I beat myself up about it. I was completely just shutting down. And, I had to realize that I needed to be a little bit more kind to myself. I was really being hard on myself, and I was doing what I thought other people were going to do. I was judging myself. I was being negative about myself. And no wonder I was scared of being vulnerable, because I thought if I'm being hard on myself, so are other people. So I had to develop a little bit of self-compassion. And in order to do that and be kind to myself, I had to do a little bit of work. I had to figure out what it is about me that I love, that I can share with other people that I know that they could love as well. So to this point, so far, the first 3 things that you need to do when you are trying to be more vulnerable is, 1, acknowledge that these fears are coming up and identify where they're coming from. Then start small. See if there's ways that you can share just a little bit part of your vulnerability with people to see reactions. Anytime you do something like that, it builds confidence. And then develop some self-compassion. If you can't do those first 3 steps, the rest isn't going to matter. If you are going to beat yourself up about it, it's not going to come off genuine when you're ready to be vulnerable. All right. So to this point, after I realized I've got to be more kind to myself, I've got to be more vulnerable, what's next? I started to really look at the negativity. And I actually had been practicing this next step, which was to challenge the negative beliefs that were coming in, to question whether those negative thoughts were about vulnerability or if they were about something else. Sometimes that negativity has nothing to do with you need to be vulnerable. It has something to do with you having low self-esteem. And so when you challenge those negative beliefs, and this could be around vulnerability or just anything in your life, you're more likely to start formulating more positivity in your everyday life. And so this is a practice that I did previous to a coach, but then I brought it back up again, was anytime a negative thought came up, I would write it down. I would create a sheet, and on the left column, it would say all the negative beliefs, thoughts, actions, whatever it was. And in the right column was a reframing column. And in the reframing column, all I would do was take the negative thought, belief, or action and put what I would do instead. So if the negative thought was, I am not good enough, I should just give up. The reframe would be, I am good enough, I just need more practice. And in order to do that, I cannot give up. And in order for this to work is that you would have to have that on hand. And once you write it down, usually it's in your brain. But if you need to have it on a notepad, in your phone, something that you can carry with you, do it, because it's super helpful. So when that negative thought would come up, I would immediately say, negative thought. All right, pause, stop. What's my reframe? And I would sit there and I would say it 3 times. The reframe, the positive thought. And if there was a negative action, like putting my head down or anything, I would open up my body and do something more confident. So thoughts, actions, body language, it all matters. And how you reframe it is up to you, but make it so it's good enough. You don't want it to be light. Make it specific, really drive the point, and you have to feel it. And I said it 3 times back to myself. Don't just say it inside your head. Say it out loud. Go to your car, go in a space, go in a closet somewhere if you're at work. Whatever you need to do, say it out loud. but also mean it. Say it loud, say it proud. And if 3 times is not enough, say it 4, 5, 6, 10 times, whatever is going to work for you. So, challenging those negative beliefs, reframing, all great opportunities for you to understand and overcome what is holding you back from being more vulnerable. Another way that you can also be more vulnerable is to seek more supportive relationships. And that could just be being around people that are in the same situation that you are. I know that I went on a women's retreat. It's been almost a month now. It's been like 3 weeks. I was scared of being vulnerable, and I really wasn't as vulnerable as I could have been the first day or two. I was more silent. But what I realized is all of the people there, they don't judge. And if they did, they kept it inside. The point of that retreat was to support like-minded individuals. In this case, it was all women who are on their own spiritual journey into finding what they need to live the most fulfilled life. Or at least that's what I needed. Maybe everyone was there for their different reasons, but that's why I was there. But at the end of the day, we all wanted to be heard and we all wanted to be supported. So when you seek supportive relationships, could be a women's circle, it could be a men's group, it could be whatever that you're trying to be more vulnerable about, go do that. That's why they have, AA is another one. It's a place where you can go if you have an addiction to alcohol to be able to open up and share your story, not only to get help, but maybe to inspire others. And being in that supportive group and forming those relationships are super important, because if you are surrounded by a bunch of people that are always negative and judging, you're not going to live a fulfilled life. You're going to always recluse. You're going to hold all these feelings and emotions inside. And when the time is wrong, they're all going to come out somehow. And it's not good. It's like Pandora's box. When you shove all these different things inside and you don't let them out, you're going to see that box open and you can't shut it once it opens. Another way you can also help unleash a little bit more vulnerability in a healthy way is to just practice mindfulness and being aware of your feelings and thoughts. Because if you're aware of your own feelings and thoughts, then you can be a little bit more aware of other people's feelings and thoughts around you. Now, why is it important to be vulnerable? Liz, how am I going to do all of this and still feel like I'm making a difference, and what's the point? Well, let's talk about what the point is. Now, being vulnerable can be important for several reasons. The first one is just your health. First, your mental health, and then your physical health. When you're able to get out those feelings and emotions, rather than bottling them up, rather than putting them in Pandora's box to just explode at a later date, it leads to higher levels of release and relief. When you bottle it up and you put it all inside, it starts to build pressure. And those thoughts and feelings can lead to stress, anxiety, depression. They can also lead to physical health problems. Your mental state affects your physical state. When you're not in a healthy mental state, your physical state can be affected as well, because a lot of emotions and feelings can be manifested into stress in the body. So if you're always feeling sick and tired and always stressed and always have anxiety, think about if you've been bottling up all these thoughts and feelings, and what are some ways that you can release and feel that relief. And sometimes that has to start with therapy, or hiring somebody to listen to you. And maybe it's not a therapist. If you're not depressed or anxious or have anxiety, you can still go to a therapist or a psychologist. But it also might be just hiring a life coach like me, or someone that you trust to really get those emotions out. The next is better relationships. When you're more vulnerable with others, it builds trust and it can build intimacy, especially in a romantic relationship. That deepens your compassion and your empathy around your relationships and your feelings of other people. When you're more vulnerable with your partners in a romantic relationship, you usually receive a more supportive response. But you have to do this in a healthy way. Communication is key when sharing your vulnerability when it comes around thoughts and emotions. You have to be very careful when you communicate these things. And I've learned this lesson. And if you communicate it in a way that is attacking, where someone can take it as an attack on them, you might not saying, well, it's your fault, but you're saying something about what's going on. Some can take it as an attack on their livelihood, on their heart and their soul. So when you're communicating these feelings and emotions, it's important that one, you use the I feel phrasing. I'm feeling this way. I feel that I'm not getting what I need, and here's why. Because if you say the words I feel and someone comes back at you defensively, let them talk. Let them be able to express their emotions. If they cut you off, let them speak and say, I want to make sure that you understand. I want to share my feelings and emotions with you, and I'm being very vulnerable right now. And it means a lot if you would listen to me and let me get out all of the things that I want to say, and then I'm happy and really want to hear what you have to say as well. And if they come back at you a negative way or condescending, maybe they are gaslighting you, then you can let them know that I feel you're not listening. And the reason is because I'm sharing my feelings and emotions. And what you're saying back to me is that I am not allowed to feel these feelings and emotions. And that can be really hard. That can be really hard for someone to hear, especially for people that aren't used to being empathetic with others, especially if you're dealing with a narcissist. I've dealt with narcissists in my life, both in my personal and romantic relationships. And sometimes those people don't have the ability to stop and listen. Or they stop and listen and they tell you what you want to hear because they don't know what else to do. They just want you to stop talking and stop being emotional. But learn ways and tools and techniques on how you can healthfully, in a good way, share your feelings and emotions without attacking other people, and know how to respond if people attack you, are defensive, or gaslight you. Because if you're not equipped with those tools, guess what? You're going to be defensive back, and there's going to be no solution or resolution, and we're going to go backwards or be in the same place that we were always before that conversation. Now, moving on, why is it important to be vulnerable? What's another reason? You have this greater sense of self-acceptance. It can really help you embrace different aspects of yourself, which can build your confidence and authenticity. Like you're like, well, how can this make me feel, how can this be more authentic? Well, let's go back to the story of me being an Orange Theory coach and practicing vulnerability. So now that I've felt more comfortable sharing the small things, sharing dreams and aspirations, things that mean something to me, things that could be judged, but they were accepted with grace and love, I decided to try to be a little bit more vulnerable in front of a group. So what I would do is after class, I would just let them know, depending on the people, if they were brand new people that I never met before or mostly new people, I would let them know, like, thank you for coming to my class. It hasn't been an easy journey as a coach. Like, I have really had to overcome the fear of public speaking. Previously, when I would do, drama in high school or presentations in college, I would always freeze and black out. And I actually did black out my first couple of classes coaching, but now I'm getting more comfortable and confident being your coach. And I want to let you know that thank you for allowing me to be in this space with you. And if there's anything I can do better, please let me know, because I want to be the best coach for you. And that was the next level step, is just letting them know where I was coming from and how scared I was to become a coach and how hard it's been for me to overcome some fears that I've had in my life. And I would then see people come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I've seen another side of you today. Like, thank you for sharing that. It's been a real challenge for you because you're a great coach. I would have never guessed that you're having issues being able to talk to us because you come off so confident, almost cocky. So thank you for like being a real person and letting us know that you have feelings and emotions. I was like, really? Oh my gosh, this is great. I feel better about myself. I am starting to get people to realize I'm not a cocky person that is just out here being a boss to you. Like, it really means a lot to me to be able to be in front of you and help you change your life and be part of your day, the 1 hour of your day that might be the best part of your day, or that helps the rest of your day be better. So that was the next level. And then I started to get a little deeper. For those that I was starting to coach more consistently, I would let them know is like, I know you guys don't know, but the reason I became an Orange Theory coach all started from a really bad breakup that I went through. I lost my self confidence. I lost my purpose in life. And I refound it through yoga, which really made me realize that group fitness is where I needed to be. That I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, to be motivating, to help you work hard and be the best version of yourself that you can be in this room so you can be the best version of yourself in the rest of your life. And so thank you for letting me be your coach. I want to continue to be better. Let me know. And if you have anything going on in your life and you want to go get a taco or you want to go grab some breakfast or a coffee, I don't want to just be your coach inside of this room. I want to be a support to you. So let me know. And immediately after sharing that story, I had someone come up to me and say, I've been through a breakup recently as well. Thank you for sharing your story and letting me know that like I'm not alone. I'm also trying to find my purpose in life. And her and I ended up going to go got a coffee. We talked and we connected, and we didn't really talk much after that, but at least it was like that vulnerability allowed that connection for her to know that she's not alone. I had somebody else approach me and say, I went through a breakup, a really hard one as well, about a year ago. And just so you know, it does get better. You will get stronger. You're an amazing person. And thank you so much for sharing yourself. So that vulnerability not only opened that door for connection with better relationships for the people around me, it also made me feel a higher or greater feeling of self-acceptance, that it is okay to be where I am and feel the way that I feel. That also segues into the next, which is it really helps reduce the stigma around being vulnerable and what the mental health struggles, because it seems like maybe not so more these days. I think it's getting a little bit better, but I think it kind of depends on where you're spending most of your time. But having mental health struggles can sometimes be non-acceptable. If you're sharing your mental health struggles to your peers at work, maybe that's not the best place to share them. But when you do share it in the appropriate places, it helps reduce the stigma that you shouldn't be sharing those feelings and emotions. That, if you're anxious or depressed, you're just sad, get over it. Like, I've been told that before. You're not depressed, you're just sad, get over it. You know how much that hurts? It tells me that I'm not allowed to be anything but happy. And if I'm not happy, there's something wrong with me. And maybe there is something wrong, but that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. And I encourage people, if you have mental health issues, like, go seek help. I am not a therapist. I am a life coach and a wellness coach, so I can help you with some of the struggles that you have. But if you're having high levels of anxiety, if you are going through depression, you have to go see somebody. And most recently, when I had my knee surgery, I went through a high level depression. And friends and family seeing this probably were like, you did? I had no idea. Yeah, for a whole entire year, I was depressed. I was anxious. I just wanted to scream and shout and punch windows and, ram my car into people that were cutting me off. Like, I was just a pissed off, depressed mess. And I did not reach out for help. But I finally did. I finally got to a breaking point where I just wanted to cry and just give up on everything, that I finally reached out and sought a therapist. My first one I didn't love. She was okay. She was sympathetic. Someone to talk to was good to get those feelings and emotions out. But then I got to my second one. My second one, she gave me more tools, more coping mechanisms, more things to work on to actually help me overcome what I was going through. So she was more of a less sympathetic and more let's fix these problems. And I will tell you, if you go seek a therapist, a counselor, whatever it might be, if you do a couple sessions with them and they don't feel right, you're right. Go switch it to somebody else. You might have to go through 3 or 4 therapists before you find somebody that is what you need. For me, I need someone that was empathetic and had the tools and were going to tell me straight up, this is what's going on with you. This is your diagnosis. Here's a plan. Let's tackle this together. And these are the homework and the things that you needed to do. And I didn't get necessarily both of those things from one person, but at least I got the tools that I needed. I knew I was allowed to feel these emotions from the first therapist. And then the second one gave me the tools I needed. If I was to continue therapy, I probably would have then made sure I sought someone that had a little bit of both. So if you have anything going on in your life, go ask for help. Seek a therapist, whatever you need to do. It is not a bad thing to feel sad, depressed, anxious. And if you're not even that bad, if it doesn't feel that bad, is that still worth? Yes, it's still worth going to seek help. Last thing, when you're more vulnerable, it actually increases your resiliency. Anytime you go through anything hard, you become more resilient. And life is difficult. There's always going to be more things, more challenges. Life is going to throw things at us. And if you think about it, there's probably some big things in your life that you want to accomplish. In order to get there, you're probably going to have to be more resilient. And when you become more resilient and practice that by being a little bit more vulnerable and opening yourself up a little bit more and finding ways to do that healthfully, I don't even know if that's a word I've been using, but it is today, in a healthy way, be able to share that. Your resiliency will increase. And when harder things come your way, you're going to be prepared with the tools that you need to overcome them. That fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, maybe your lack of trust in other people or lack of trust in yourself will then start to increase into something better. Now, to recap, there's a lot of fear around vulnerability. That judgment, feeling anxious about being rejected. Maybe you think people will take advantage of you. You close yourself from others. You avoid being vulnerable because you're striving for perfection. You're having that social anxiety around sharing your thoughts and emotions. Maybe you apologize and blame yourself for being open when you shouldn't. You can't read a room correctly and aren't sure when is the good time to be vulnerable, or you just really, really worry about others and what they think. The tools that you need to start understanding where that's coming from is acknowledging where these fears are coming from. What fear is actually coming up for you? Where did it come from? How can you start small? Start being vulnerable in small ways to test the waters, to be more comfortable, to gain that confidence. Developing compassion for yourself. Be kind to yourself and understand it's okay to have your feelings and emotions. Looking at the negative beliefs, all that negativity, anything that's limiting you from being more vulnerable, and reframing that into a positive thing. And having that practice in your life, in any aspect of your life, is really important. Making sure that you seek supportive relationships, groups, people that are going to understand and accept you without judgment. And that probably is not going to be the close people around you. It's going to be people in the same situation as you that you know are also looking for that same safe space for vulnerability. Practicing being mindful of your own thoughts and feelings. And then that also translating into you helping understand other people's thoughts and feelings. And then reflecting on the past experiences. Where did these come from? And understanding that sometimes help you understand, like, okay, this stemmed from when I was a child. I'm not a kid anymore. I need to suck it up and I need to do better. Or this is what happened to me when my first romantic relationship. Well, that person, he was not a good guy. He was a narcissist. He was someone that hurt me. But guess what? There's so many people in this world not like that person that I'm going to be able to find and be vulnerable to. And don't forget the reasons why. Whenever you want to be vulnerable and you hold yourself back, what are the reasons that you should be vulnerable? Improving your mental health, improving your physical health, building better relationships, whether that's friendships or intimacy with your romantic relationships. That can increase intimacy levels in so many different ways. You're able to accept yourself. That greater self-acceptance can go a long way, especially in your confidence. It reduces the stigma, not just for yourself to understand that, oh, I do need to go get help. I do need somebody to help me navigate through these feelings and emotions, but then can also be an inspiration to others. That the stigma around anxiety, depression, or any mental health issues and struggles, and those are just the ones that I've gone through. There are so many different ones out there. It is okay to seek help. And so I hope that I'm one of those that can help reduce that stigma and know that it's okay to feel the way you feel. And it's okay to seek help. Otherwise, you may not ever get out of it. And last but not least, you become a more resilient person. All right. I love that you allowed me this time to really talk about vulnerability and to understand what it means, where it comes from, and some tools to help you really get clarity around it. Because clarity and then action are the two things that are going to help in any situation for you to become a more resilient person, to live a more fulfilled life, and to build those connections and bonds with people around you. All right, I like to hear from you, so please, please, please leave a comment. Maybe share a little bit of something about you. And if you are reading other people's comments, all I ask is that you be kind and non-judgmental and support each other. I'm all about creating that space where we have a space of like-minded individuals who are going to support each other without judgment, who are going to help each other and lift each other up. And so if that's something that you're interested in, please reach out. Please subscribe wherever you are, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, or you're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. If you have ideas for topics or things that you would like to hear on, and more stories of how you can be more fulfilled in your life, I want to hear them. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you around, whether it's on social media, in one of my workshops. I have some of those coming up. So if you're interested in those, please reach out. I'll drop my email down in the comments as well, or the description, so that way you can reach out if you have questions or want to work with me one-on-one to help overcome some of these fears. Maybe it's being vulnerable. Maybe it's overcoming fears. Maybe it's just having better mental and physical health and wellness in your life. All right, time for me to go and get on with my day. You have a wonderful day. I love you and thank you so much. Go out there and get what you want out of life and everything that you desire, because you deserve to live the life that you want. Bye-bye.